Today we are joined by Emily Goldberg of the Raoul Wallenberg Centre and Michael Levitt, CEO of FSWC. To begin, Emily will offer some opening remarks. Emily Goldberg is the assistant to the Honorable Professor Erwin Kotler at the Raoul Wallenberg Centre for Human Rights. She has a passion for criminal and social justice, which she furthers at the Raoul Wallenberg Centre by assisting in projects that advocate and speak out on behalf of those who are marginalized within societies around the world. She graduated from the University of Guelph with a degree in criminal justice and public policy and a minor in family relations and human development. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you, Daniela, and thank you to Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center for co-hosting this important series with us. We are proud to partner with you on this and many other important initiatives in the pursuit of justice around the world. And on behalf of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, I want to thank our audience for joining us today. I'm honored to be here to witness the testimony of Delores Kelly. Her strength, perseverance, and resilience is truly an inspiration for us all. A member of the Anishinaabe First Nations, Dolores Kelly was taken away from her family and community at the age of 6. She would spend the next 6 years in Canada's residential school system, where children had their languages, cultures, and identities taken away through assimilation. She endured loneliness, isolation, and abuse at the hands of the government and religious leadership in these schools, carrying that trauma with her long into adulthood. Thank you, Dolores, for sharing your story of growth, perseverance, and resilience.
Thank you, Emily. We appreciate you joining us this afternoon for this important programming and for the ongoing support and partnership with the Raoul Wallenberg Centre. Before we get started today, Dolores has asked that we present a little bit of background information. Beginning in 1831, the Department of Indian Affairs, along with various churches, took children from their homes and forced them to assimilate at residential schools. The desired government outcome was to teach Aboriginal children to conform to the non-Aboriginal community and to give up their cultures, languages, and identities. Canada-wide, over 150,000 First Nation, Inuit, and Métis children were sent to residential schools, where tragically over 6,000 would never return home. In total, over 130 residential schools operated across the country, with the very last school closing in 1996. There are roughly 80,000 residential school survivors still living today. It took until 2008 for the Government of Canada to issue a formal apology to residential school survivors. At the time, former Prime Minister Stephen Harper gave the following statement. The government now recognizes that the consequences of the Indian residential school policy were profoundly negative, and that this policy has had lasting and damaging impact on Aboriginal culture, heritage, and language. The legacy of Indian residential schools has contributed to social problems that continue to exist in many communities today. We are so honored that Delores Kelly was willing and able to share her story with us and revisit some very painful memories. Today's In Conversation with a Survivor speaker series will be a little bit different. Due to a last-minute scheduling conflict, Dolores was unable to be with us this afternoon. However, luckily, we were able to pre-film her interview. We'll be sharing that with you right now. Thank you.
And I go by the name of Delores Kelly, which was given to me through the government. So that's my government name. I just want to make that clear that who I am is the name that I said at the beginning, and I belong to the Lynx clan.
We'd love to hear a little bit about your life before the residential school. What was your childhood like, your family, things like that?
Okay. First of all, like I said, I told you my traditional name, and I am the oldest of 9 children, and I am third generation Indian residential school survivor in my family system. And we had my paternal grandmother live with us in a cabin. I'm talking about before being sent to the residential schools. So that was beautiful, because according to my dad, I was able to speak the language by the time I was 3. I was very fluent in Anishinaabe Moin, right? So I find that very very heartwarming for me, um, because that is one of the main issues of being sent to the Indian residential schools. So that was um, that was taught to me in my family system. But on the other hand, like I just said, I'm third generation Indian residential school survivor. So both my parents went, and my grandparents. So by the time my dad started his family, he also was the oldest of four brothers, and the same with my mother. She's the oldest of four sisters. Then I came along. So I'm the first grandchild. I'm the first daughter of our family system, our family unit, right? And like I said, my dad told me that I spoke the language very fluently by the time I was 3. And I remember those days. And we lived in a cabin, in all of us. And I remember our house being built. I can still smell the wood, and standing there in my little dress and little uh, leather jacket, and my hair was long. I used to have pictures of those, but I don't know. They got lost along the way. I wish I had those now. So anyway, um, yeah, life was good. My dad was a seasonal worker, which means that in our area, like Lake of the Woods area, a lot of our men, that lived in the reservations, they were guides in the summertime. So that's how we lived. Uh, that's how my dad fed us, I guess, like through being a guide on a daily basis for the rich Americans that came by, through the resort, because we're also surrounded by a lot of resorts where we're from. And my mother was stay at home. I helped her, being the oldest. I held water. I cut wood, before residential school. I remember all that. It's not labor, it's part of being a family unit. This is something you're taught, right? So I never saw that as, like some people can call it child abuse nowadays, right? But with our with our family, it's something that you just became a part of, of the family unit. As soon as you start learning how to wash clothes, haul water, go cut wood, you did that. And but being a child, I had a lot of fun because I would climb the trees, and in the winter time slide down to the lake and make the hole, and it was all fun for me. And then hauling water in a sled, and I never saw anything as hard work. That's I find that funny because I was always playing. Jump in a snowbank and sit there for a while, and then forget what I was doing. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to go get water. I'm supposed to be getting water so my mother can wash clothes, right? Yeah. So yeah, that was my life. And then, like, our family was taught to sort of think seasonal wise, because we did certain things for different reasons and at certain times. And in the summertime, we all moved to a camp area where you pick blueberries. That was another fun time for me because, again, like I said, this is all before 5 years old, right? Before school. So everything was always fun for me. I'd be climbing trees, and, by then, I'd have siblings, and then my mother would make swings um, in the trees, like she knew how to do all that. And then we'd all pick blueberries, and of course, I ate most of them, and yeah, we never got in trouble for that. Like we would go with other families, so it was a family thing. Like, you pick a patch, and sometimes you stayed there for 2 or 3 days and just picked all the blueberries. And then when you had enough, you'd go back into nearby town and go sell them, right? Go sell your blueberries. And again, that was not, I didn't consider that labor, like, because at the end of the day too, we would get a an ice cream bar, you know. Oh, that was the best, for being out in the sun and playing and picking blueberries. We get ice cream at the end of the day. So there's that. And then in the fall, again, all the families went out and picked a camp, and we picked rice, wild rice. And that was another way of getting your family food on the table. We all participated. And again, that was fun because you're out in a canoe, right? And you had to learn how to pick the rice and get all that itchy stuff from your clothing at the end of the day and pack it. And yeah, those are the days. Yeah, and families would have their own campsites, and everybody did that. All the families that lived in the community. So, yeah, that's what we did. So I shared summer, spring, winter, fall. Winter, we in the winter time, we again, we did uh for winter food, we would put out snares. I learned how to go out in a bush with my mother and make a snare and go get rabbits. That was another exciting thing for me, another fun activity. Everything was fun for me because, like under 5 years old, you don't see anything as hard work because, you can flip around all you want as you walk, or, climb a tree, whatever. So those are good memories for me. And having my grandmother, she also taught me from the time I was able to walk. We had what kind of a tree is that now? We had a big tree by our house. It was, I'm pretty sure it was one of those tall trees. I think it was a jack pine tree. But from the time I was able to walk, she would give me a sema, which is tobacco in your language, English language. And she taught me to do my offerings, my prayers every day, like and put it by the tree. Offer to the four directions and say my prayers. Yeah, so that tree is still there actually. Yeah, it's pretty old and kind of dented, and yeah. Anyway, yeah, those are the things that I learned traditional wise, and having the language um before being sent to the residential schools. So
Sounds like it was an amazing childhood. I mean, you painted such a vibrant picture of, I think we can all just imagine, being outside and being a child and, being carefree and playing outside.
yeah,
So if you could,
yeah.
yeah, how obviously you went to the residential school, how did life change? Do you remember being sent to the school? What was that experience there?
Okay, prior to being sent to the Indian residential schools, the government, the federal government, started putting schools into the communities, into the reservations. So we had a day school. We had a school there. So we attended that for a while. I attended that for a while. At the age of 5, I think. 5. Yeah. And I remember starting in the fall and the winter because I slowly quit going to school because I was so busy playing in the snow, right? And Also, I had fears. I had a lot of fears of the other kids, the boys. You know, I had pigtails. My grandmother would, fix my hair, and the boys would pull my pigtails. So I was afraid to go into class, right, into school. So I guess from that, I wasn't attending school. And then at that time in my era, like in the 50s, late 50s, they had truant officers, right, who kept track of all the kids that went to that are supposed to be going to school. And that year, I'm not sure if it's that year, but anyway, I got sent to the residential school. Yeah, I got sent to the residential school. Um, yeah, that's when I started experiencing a lot of blackness, a lot of darkness, because I can't remember, right? So that's from trauma, being removed from a loving family system, you know. But I have to mention too that although my parents became alcoholic after the age of 5, that's when I noticed, I think by 7. But anyway, prior to that, I seen a little bit of alcoholism, alcoholic behavior from my uncles who were going to school and attending university and all that, come to our house to visit. And at that time, I didn't know what was wrong, but they were drunk. So those behaviors were something I noticed. So yeah, things started slowly changing after that, after I started going to Indian Day school and the residential schools for my whole family. For the whole family system. I understand it now. I understand what happened to our family unit, but at the time I was in a lot of trauma, because my first experience uh, of attending the residential schools was like, I guess, like a sudden um, something that I felt suddenly happened to the family unit. All of a sudden I'm put into this strange building, and I didn't know what was going on because, like you're 5, 6 years old, right? When you first get sent in. And according to my sister, that's next, maybe 2 years younger than me. So she would go along with my parents when they first dropped me off to the residential school. And she said that I stood there and screamed and screamed and screamed, for my mother and my parents to not leave me there. So that part is a blur, for me. Like, I guess that stems from trauma, experiencing trauma from being put in this strange place with these people with black robes on, and they had white bands, and like that. So the first residential school I attended, 3, by the way. And yeah, I forgot to mention, we Treaty 3 had the most residential schools in our area. They had 6 here. Just to let you know that. Anyway, that was my first residential school. I mean, I learned how to skate there. I learned also, I forgot to mention, because I'm a 3rd-generation Indian residential school survivor, my parents were both fluent in English, and my mother had the language. So somehow there was a secret, um, uh, how would I call that? That when I was put in these schools, I didn't speak our language, because they taught me to speak English also. So I was one of the kids that didn't get punished for that because I knew how to speak English and I understood, right? Whereas a lot of our people didn't have that, didn't have English. So for myself, I was lucky in that area. Um, my grandmother never learned how to speak English. She understood it, I believe, you know. But it was kind of funny because now that I'm older and understand what's going on and different dialects of the language and how how she must have seen it, eh? Like, because all my uncles married non-native women, eh? So we always saw white girlfriends come to the house, and then they would come and say to my grandma because I'd be sitting. I was always beside my grandma, and they'd come and say, "Oh, hi, Mrs. Kelly," you know, all that, and then she'd look and smile. She'd go, "Hi," you know, like that. So she was imitating the, you know, the way she thought it sounded, right? Because our language is very low and guttural, right? So, and for me, I would look at her and say, what does that sound? Why is she sounding like but now I know. Now I know, like she was just imitating, you know, what she thought the English language sounded like. But I just wanted to share that part because, you know, I find that cute now, you know. Yeah. By the way, I have her dimples, and I'm the only one that has her dimples.
Sounds like she had a big impact on you in your life as well.
Oh, she is my saving grace. She taught me everything that I needed to know to go through my life experiences. I see that now, but when you're living it, you don't see that, right? Because I'm 67 now, and yeah, and 67 for her, she was put into an old folks home. So I'm very fortunate. I'm healthy, you know. I'm not diabetic. Um, today I have some minor ailments like arthritis. She had arthritis in her knees, so I'm starting to experience that. I'm taking care of it. Um, but I should be more active. So, and I have a good doctor that keeps me uh you know, like watch your sugar, you know, all that kind of stuff. So that's good. Yeah. So I'm fortunate that I'm not diabetic. I think in this area, there's 28 communities here in Treaty 3. I would say a good percentage of the nation here, I would say at least a good 80% of our people are diabetic, you know? And I think they have the youth too. I'm not sure what it's called, but they're starting to experience that too, right? Yeah. So anyway, keep bring me back because I'm going off. I
No,
found my
I think these are all, and I think it all kind of ties together as well. I think you're just painting a really great picture of the community and of what life was like before, and life has been like since as well, which I think is just so important as well.
okay.
You said you were in a couple of different Indian residential schools. What determined when you were sent from one to the other, and was the experience different in each school, or was it an age thing? What determined that?
Well, you know, I questioned my dad once when I start getting myself together and quit my you know, stop my acting out behavior, meaning, you know, using alcohol and drugs. I asked my dad when I clean up, you know, one question: why did we get sent to the residential schools? And he looked at me, and all he said was, we didn't have a choice. He said, either I put you in there or they would take you away. Yeah.
can only imagine how difficult that was, especially seeing as, being a third generation survivor, your family knew what you were going to more or less be experiencing as well. Can you tell us, I understand, obviously I know that the trauma, it's totally normal that we block things out, especially if they're so traumatic at a young age, but do you remember any of the methods that were used to force assimilation? I know you mentioned the English language and you didn't happen to have that as an issue, but can you mention any other issues that you do remember that might have happened in the schools?
Well, I guess it would have to do with religion and spirituality, because they were all three are Catholic. They're that was the denomination in all three of them, and I don't really know why I went to three of them. I think it had to do with because we were also very poor, like money wise, you know, and you had to be in time to uh save your place, I guess, in a residential school. So if there was no room in there, they would send you somewhere else. That's what I think. um yeah, so I went to three of them, all Catholic. um and I guess the main thing I can remember is the religion part. Like we had to get up early, 6 o'clock maybe, to um what they call benediction. I don't know if there's anyone that knows the way Roman Catholics function to go to heaven. Anyway, so every morning we had to, we get up real early, with a ring of a bell. One school, she liked to clap. She'd come in there and clap real hard, and she had a red face, and yeah. So, and then we'd get up and go do what you had to do in the morning, wash, shower, or whatever. I didn't go to church. And benediction, it was called, like 6 o'clock before breakfast, right? Um, and three times on Sundays, you know. And one of the things I remember too is um, we had to confess. There was a confessional in the chapel, or the bigger church that we attended, and we all had to go and confess our sins. You know, today, as I've written a few stories about myself, and or remember, and because as a child, what does a child do that's a sin? So, I would say maybe the usual, oh, I gave this little girl, another girl, a push, or talk mean to her. Those are the things I considered sins, right? And then you have to give, have to say 100 Hail Marys or whatever, and did that. But to a point where, we were all going every Sunday. So, and then, one of the major sins as a Catholic is you don't lie, you don't steal. So, and then today, I find I started making up things. So that's lying, right? So, yeah, that's the kind of uh, teachings or upbringing we had in the residential schools around religion. And, but at one point, you know, um, I, uh, I start feeling really lonely. I start experiencing a lot of loneliness, a lot of wanting to go home, after the initial shock of being there and knowing I had to stay there. So, I had to wait till maybe June, or if I was lucky, to go home in a holiday, during the holidays, like Christmas or uh, March break, whatever. Um,
Did you make any friends at the school? I know loneliness was overwhelming. Were you ever able to make friends, or did you eventually have any of your siblings at any of the schools that you were at?
yeah, my sister came along later, like when I started attending the second residential school. My brother came along, then my younger sister, but we're all a year apart. But then also, the schools were separated into big girls, little girls, and of course, you didn't see the boys at all. Yeah, so she came in, but we weren't allowed to really socialize with each other or even allowed to play with each other. So I kind of would see her at a distance, right, running around or whatever. And every once in a while, be able to go give her a hug without anybody seeing. And then my other sister came along. I think they sent her there when she was 4. So by then I was like, 4. I think by 9. I think I was 9. And she was very lonely, and she cried a lot. So in the middle of the night, I would go get her and have her sleep with me and hold her. And she liked having her ear played with, so she'd be comfortable. And hopefully, and I would try and stay awake, before the lights came on, that I would get her back to her own bed. But sometimes I fell asleep because I was tired too, right? So we would get caught and we would get in trouble, right?
If you did get caught and you got in trouble in the schools, what were typical punishments that were handed out?
For me, um, I didn't experience any, at least I don't remember experiencing any kind of strappings at that time for getting caught for doing things that you're not supposed to do. But I witnessed other girls being punished, with a strap, or being like an example for something like running away or talking to the boys or running around the hallway when you're supposed to be walking, all that kind of stuff. I seen that. But as for myself, like I said, like um I was very quiet. I was I was afraid of everyone. I played with some girls, but really not really. I didn't get attached too much to anybody. And I just prayed. I just prayed because at a point I think I once wanted to become a nun, you know. And I think I was 8. I think that was after my first communion. I really felt that love. I think, that I wanted to become a nun and do some work with people. And that kept me going, though. That feeling of loving this statue that was in front of me. And you know but that also kept me stable, so to speak. Somehow it kept the love in me that I had. I was able to put it onto this person, the Blessed Virgin Mary, that was a virgin, and had a child, which was Jesus, as the story goes, right? So I put all my love into that, and so I was able to experience what was being suppressed, right, which was love. So I prayed a lot to all these different statues, learn about God. Um, yeah, but there was things that happened. I was sexually abused in a second residential school by a priest I trusted, right? And uh yeah, it was quite the experience in terms of how how manipulative the the priests and nuns were. You know, the today it felt like as if they set you up because I was one of the girls that had to clean the priest's rectory or their sleeping areas, or I got sent to the principal's office for some reason. But then again, like I told you, that was very quiet. So, you know, and yeah, these are where I start being really, really, I guess the word would be, hmm, fear. I guess fear is, I lived with a lot of fear after that. And I was jumpy, and I stayed away from people. And one of the things I remember, actually, I was talking to my husband about that. I hated the smell of food there because it was a new scent, new odor of vegetables, of whatever it was. We had to line up. So I would line up there, and I always felt nauseated because I didn't want to go in and eat because I didn't like the smell, right? Um, but we're always lining up, you know. We had to line up for everything. And you are a number. That's right. They stripped you of your identity and your native name, the name your grandmothers gave you. They stripped you of that. But that had already been done because when my mother had to register us, you had to provide an English name, right? But anyway, um, so for us as Indian residential school survivors, that's how they stripped you of your identity because you were given clothes that were all the same. They cut your hair, they cut my braids, and they would give you this haircut. Like, I'm sure you've seen pictures. Yeah. And you were a number. They never ever called you by your name. Like I was 54 in one school. Uh I think in the third one I was 28 or something like that. And in the first one, I'm pretty sure I was 53. Yeah, yeah. But and then they marked all your clothes with that number. Yeah. And just to go off a little bit, I studied a little bit of um criminology and psychology and all that, and I did a lot of research. And but I always like to mention this to people, because the whole idea of this institutionalization that they did for the residential school survivor came from Europe. Because if you look at the buildings there, they're all structured the way the Indian residential schools were built. Brick walls, windows, and I like to share to the fact that, the way they built our schools and the way they treated us and the way they numbered us, those came from the European criminals, right? That's what they did to criminals, right? Yeah. So I always like sharing that part of how everything from Europe came to Canada and how they treated us and how they put us into these residential schools and stripped our identities, right? And took our language and our way of life, and always threatening our parents, if you don't do this, we'll do that. And that's straight from my dad, of what he told me. Mm, yeah. I learned how to skate. I used to think I was the world's best figure skater. Hmm. But I wasn't. I skated on my ankles. I would I always remember that. But it was fun. I love winter. I still love it right now, you know. Um there were sad times, there were sad incidents, like because we were segregated, right? You couldn't talk to your siblings, but once in a while, um, they would allow the boys and girls to skate together, right? And the nuns, they would skate with us with their big long black skirts, and they'd be swirling around and around and around. But anyway, one night or one evening, I spotted my little brother, and he was standing against the rink, and he was crying. He was crying, and I couldn't go help him. But he had his tongue. He had put his tongue on some steel, you know, where your tongue gets stuck. So, and he was bleeding. And the thing was, I froze there because I couldn't go and help him. Yeah.
That must have been incredibly hard for you.
Yeah. Yeah, that hurts, that memory, because being the oldest, you somehow know you take care of your siblings, you know, and being in that position of because I was scared of punishment, I couldn't help him, you know. Um, just things like that, they kept us apart. Uh, uh, yeah, you weren't allowed to go assist anyone, and because everybody, like I did so much research and digging in and reading in regards to our Indian residential school experiences in Canada, and all of Turtle Island, like the states have their own horrific stories also, and it was pretty well the same. They kept us apart. Like the federal policies were, we're going to take the Indian out of the child. That was the assimilation process, right? We'll take their language, we'll take their families, and they did a good job, you know. They did a very good job because there's so many broken people, wounded people in this time that that I work with, you know. That is my job. That is my gift to, I believe, why I'm still here, and it's sad, but I worked hard to be where I'm at. I guess, one of the most important things I need to share as a woman, as a kokum, as Indian residential school survivor and Indian day school survivor, is they. I can only speak for myself, but I am aware of other people. They did a good job of uh, of oppressing, repressing, depressing your emotions and feelings. So I think, with the first traumatic experience I had at the age of 6, I slowly started to shut down. That's why I don't recall too many attachments with other kids or people. That's how I learned to look after myself. So, and I don't recall After that first experience of being dropped off there and screaming and screaming and screaming and backing out from it, when I was first left there, after that, I don't remember feeling happy, feeling sad, or any of those emotions, right? I heard, like if I fell down and tripped, it skinned my knee, I would look at it, but I wouldn't cry, you know. If you did, you'd be called a baby, you know, from other kids. And yeah. Um, but anyway, as I was saying, like, they slowly shut me down, like I was in a residential schools from the time I was 6 to 12, I think. Yeah. And those are the developmental stages as a human being, right? And
Can you tell us a little bit about what life was like after? So when you were after you were 12 years old, when you went back home, what was that experience like for you?
okay. First I'll tell you that we did occasionally get to go home on holidays, if my mother or my dad had the money to come and get us, because one of the policies of being in these schools, which I saw too, is if you wanted your children to be home for the holidays, it was your responsibility to go and pick up your children. So, and most of the time my parents didn't. But the few occasions that we did get to go home. I'll talk about one event, because that one event led me to a lot of behaviors that I displayed for a number of years, which is alcoholism and drug addiction. But I think, after we started leaving the home, the children would be taken away from the parents, or like my parents. It must have been a very hard time for my parents, when I think back, to have to have people come to the door and say, you have to send your children to this school or we will take them away, right? And when I put myself in that position, that must have been a painful process, you know, because that's what I noticed. My parents started to drink. Yeah, I started to drink. I'm not saying my dad didn't drink prior to that, but like maybe a couple times I seen him drink a beer. But I think after that they became really alcoholic, and they started leaving me if I did go home with my siblings. At one point, I called them my kids, because somehow in my head that, being the oldest, these are my kids. I had to go through therapy for that, but anyway, just to put that in there. Um, that one winter that I did go home, I stole my mother's wine, and drank it. I liked it. It changed me instant. I was an alcoholic. So by the time I was 11, I was stealing her drinks, right? Whatever. And she laid a beating on me that one winter. A severe beating where my face was swollen. She had stomped on my face. And there was nowhere to turn. The community knew about it, but no one came. There was an elder, though, next door. She gave me some birch bark to put on my face, right? She said that would help the swelling, and I was bruised. So that was my first experience of the alcohol, I guess. And talking about my alcoholism, I was an instant alcoholic, and it helped me cope throughout my life for a very long time. I didn't have to think about any experiences of the past, right? the loneliness, the violence, that I witnessed in the schools, and the sexual abuse that I witnessed. And yeah, um, I became a parent. I was now my siblings' mother and dad. Because like I told you in the beginning, as part of being a family unit, you learn how to get the water, wash clothes, well, helped your mom do all that. So you're learning, right? You're observing all that. So by the time I was 7, I knew how to do all that. And my mother would start taking off and leaving me with the siblings so she can go to town. And a lot of the times I was left with them at 7. I don't know how we lived. Like, again, there's that. My grandmother was gone to visit sometimes, right? She went to visit her relatives in a nearby community, so she didn't really know what was going on. That I was being left with the siblings and brand new babies, and one brother, I started keeping him when he was 2 weeks old. Yeah, can you imagine that? Yeah, but I did it. The thing is, I did it. And I learned how to make the fire and keep the house warm. And then when I think about it, oh my God, we must have been really watched, by the grandmothers and grandfathers, the ancestors looked after us. Because I remember having my siblings sit around the stove and to keep warm. But then again, being a child, we always played too, you know, pull them around the box and, put the little ones in there. Oh, all right. That's my grandson. I raised my grandson. He's 20 now. Yeah.
You really are so strong for everything that you've done, even from such a young age. I mean, at 7 to help, raise your siblings and everything else that you've been through. Speaking for myself, but I'm sure everyone else on this call also, you just have this resilience and this strength that like we, can't imagine, but also, we just don't. You know, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us.
Hmm. But the thing is, I didn't set what I'm sharing today in order. Like, I had to do a lot of therapy. I had to go to individual treatment from myself from alcoholism and addictions, and also went to family treatment when I started having my own family. Uh, from the time, like, I've got, let's see, I think I almost have 30 years sobriety now. Yeah. Yeah. Uh, yeah. So, it's it hasn't been an overnight trip. It's been difficult. It's been difficult, in meaning I had to get in touch with my emotions. I had to get in, which were so dead for a long time. I had to learn how to name I what emotion I was feeling, because I didn't know. All I could feel was sadness and anger once in a while. Even that was very repressed. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. A lot of fun times. In regard to telling my story, I always have to bring myself to a good memory so I can balance myself here, so I don't go too deep into any kind of depression. I can visit depression, be at the edge of it, and no, I don't stay there, but I can visit it and say, bonjour, hello, I'm visiting you, but I will not stay there. Feel that emotion and climb back, right? And uh, I think too, I'm very fortunate that which I got from my grandmother, which I feel that was passed down to me, is that sense of humor. I laugh easily. You know, I'm very silly, and and my grandmother was like that. From the day from to the day that I would visit her in the senior home, she always joked. She would say such funny things. She'd be making fun of the nurses because they didn't understand the language, right? So I would giggle with her. I lost her when I was 16. Yeah. I mean, that was the last time I saw her was when I was 16. And unfortunately, I couldn't attend her funeral. I think it's just as well. I think I would have been broken, So, yeah. Uh, what else can I say?
What's something that makes you hopeful for the future? So you
For me, I'll talk about my education. Okay. I didn't have any. I didn't. Um, I, well, I attended schools, I got passed, and by that, I always felt dumb. So I literally physically quit school when I was grade 8. So from after that, I didn't have any kind of formal education. But mind you, I was registered in a high school. But to me, I was registered, so I went in the front door and out the back door kind of thing, you know. But then I have friends telling me, you were so smart in high school, and go, oh yeah, okay. But I guess I must attended and participated. But those things were already gone. I didn't have any kind of compassion for being educated, you know, because I had already experienced alcohol, and that would take everything away. So I was already conditioned for that road. I was not conditioned for to be educated. I had no interest, but I loved reading. I loved reading. At one time, I could read 3 books in a day. You know, yeah. I mean, they were thick books. There were novels, but yeah. But there's a downside to that too. I neglected my children. They ran around me while I was reading. I had no interaction because I didn't have that skill, right? But anyway, when I cleaned up, when I was, I think I was in my late 30s, I decided to clean up. And, but first, when I hit 18, 19 in Manitoba, I was living in Manitoba, there was a program, not a program, but some kind of policy that within the children's aid system, if you're not able to look after your children, you have to go take an alcohol treatment center. So I was put in there, but I didn't take it seriously. I laughed my way out of there because I thought everything was so funny, and because I was not ready to deal with what was going on here. All the sexual abuse I experienced, and the sadness. And I went through that program, but I remember that one concert. I was wondering why everybody was crying all the time. When you do the group sessions with people, I'd be sitting there and saying, "Oh, what's wrong with people? Why are they crying?" I was 18, 19 years old. Um, but I remember my dad coming there and at graduation, I was 19. I remember his words. He said, "I cannot tell my daughter what to do. I can only be a guide." Yeah. And he has been. My dad was a chronic alcoholic all his life. He experienced residential schools, but I can look at it as, yeah, he has been my guide because he showed me the rough road. Maybe I followed it for a while, but on the other hand, I chose to clean up. He did try to clean up numerous times, because I recall sobriety in my home. And then all of a sudden, I would walk in, all the furniture was gone, right? And ask Mom, what happened? Well, your dad started drinking, sold everything, you know. Those things happen a few times in my life, like in my early 20s. I seen all that, and I see my mother struggle and try to stay with him. And yeah, yeah. So rough times for my mother. But anyway, I cleaned up at, I decided to, because I already experienced a treatment center. So there was recovery tools that were planted within myself, right? So although I didn't use them right away, but somewhere, further down my life, when I decided to clean up, I said, okay, I'm going to treatment. I am going to deal with this sexual abuse. Although I had denied it when I was 18, 19, that nothing ever happened to me. So why is everybody crying? That was my attitude, right? So by the time I decided to clean up at 39, I was serious. I thought I already had children, but that's another story in regards to my uh, having no parenting skills. So that's another story in itself. But anyway, I cleaned up, and I started learning a few things, you know. But I was still I still had that attitude, at the first treatment center, because I had a counselor. Because, like I said, I was very quiet, reserved. I didn't associate with anybody. I would not risk anybody getting attached to anybody ever, right? But anyway, this counselor I had, his name was Gary, and he called me to the office, and he said he called me in because we'd have weekly sessions, and nothing, I felt nothing was accomplished. But anyway, the last visit I had with him, one of the last visits, he says to me, Dolores, he says, do you know that the only thing you'll ever say when you come in here is, I know? I looked at him, I said, I know, and I walked out. But years later, that became a teaching. I changed it around somewhere along my healing journey, that I don't know nothing. That's what works for me. I know nothing. Whose quote is that? Oh, I know nothing. Um, some philosopher, because that's a profound meaning. I know nothing. You're educated, and that is the deepest place one can go, is to admit you know nothing, because you're open to learning, right? You're open to understanding. You're open to compassion. So that long ago statement has helped me today. And then at the same time, I started going back into school. I went into I started my GED. I took tests. I did my GED. I did my college requirements. I started doing intro classes. I took everything that I can think of, like all intro philosophy, into pottering, even, pottery. It was fun. It was fun. I was 40. I was always the oldest in the class. I didn't care. I sat in front. The kids were very curious of me, like, because they're just coming out of high school. you know. I tell them I'm Anishinaabe, which means Indian, and they'd say, "Do you guys really still live in tents?" you know. They were so ignorant. This is in BC, right? And I found them really cute, but they were very respectful. Because some of the classes too, it must have been the way I started to carry myself and walk, because I would enter a classroom and say, are you the prof for today or for this course? I'd say, no, I'm a student. Yeah. So, that's like, oh my gosh, over 40 years ago. I still haven't gotten my BA. I will this year. I'm doing 3 courses right now as we speak. So,
Well, you've
oh.
definitely taught us a thing or two today. That's for sure. That is for sure.
So I don't know what I'm going to do with my BA though, but it's just my own personal endeavor, I guess, that I have a
Thirst
BA.
for knowledge. We all understand that.
Yeah, and I'll have a Bachelor of Arts. I was an honor student for a while, then I slowly kind of dwindled down, with work and all that, and yeah, but that's okay. So that's my education piece. I loved reading. I still do. I get carried away when I'm supposed to be researching this one topic, then I get way off somewhere and start reading this. I totally love reading. I'm not the greatest of writers. It takes me a long time and thought to do a paper. Like people are encouraging me to go for my master's and PhD. I says, oh no, I don't want to write. This is good. Why don't you give me an honorarium and doctorate? you know? Yeah. So that's my education piece, I guess.
Well, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to talk to all of us today, especially given how busy you are with work and school and everything else. And we really, really appreciate it. A big thank you to Dolores for sharing such a powerful story with us. I'm going to turn it over now very quickly to our president and CEO, Michael Levitt, for a couple of closing remarks. Michael.
Thank you very much, Daniela. And I'm sure I speak for everybody on this Zoom when I say how absolutely moving Dolores's presentation was. And even though Dolores is not here live at the moment, and we pre-taped her interview, I think the emotion and the vivid description of what she's been through in her life jumped right off the screen, and I'm sure it's impacting us all. And even through all the trauma and hardship she described when she talked about the fact that her sense of humor is sort of a defining characteristic, I think that warmth and that sense of humor really, really did shine through. So she was so courageous to share her story with us and really articulate to us the struggles that she's been through as a survivor of the residential school system. So I really just want to thank Dolores so much. As always, I want to thank the team at the Raoul Wallenberg Centre, Erwin, Brandon, and we had Emily do the introduction today. Emily Goldberg, thank you so much. And of course, to the staff at the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center, Daniela, Melissa, Jordan, our education team that works on this In Conversation with a Survivor speaker series every 2 weeks. Thank you for continuing to really bring us some incredibly compelling stories from survivors of all different backgrounds. I think that's really what makes this program so special. And to everybody that's on the Zoom call today, thank you for tuning in again. I see a lot of the same people, but I also see new people that have come out to join us for this session. Thank you, because it's your interest and the emails that we get after telling us what an impact it's having that really, really does inspire us to keep going. And again, to the survivors that tell their stories to us every other Wednesday, It's such an impactful program. So thank you all for being with us. Dolores, thank you again. And Daniela, back to you.
Thank you so much, Michael. I want to thank you all again on behalf of the Education Department for tuning in today, whether it's your first time or you've been here for the program since the beginning. We really appreciate it. We hope to see you all here 2 weeks from today, February 24th, where Michelle Gleed-Goldstein will be talking about her father, Bill Gleed's legacy, and the Caring Testimony Project. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.